The heat in the master suite was a thick, humid pressure, smelling of expensive eucalyptus and the lingering sharp ozone of Bennett's cologne. Elara stood before the floor-to-ceiling vanity, her silk slip clinging to her damp skin like a second, desperate layer of protection. She felt the warmth of him before he even touched her, that heavy, magnetic presence that used to make her heart skip with joy, but now only made it thud with a sickening dread. Bennett stepped behind her, his large tanned hands sliding over her shoulders, his thumbs grazing the sensitive skin of her neck with a practiced, hollow tenderness. He leaned down, his lips ghosting over her ear, his breath warm and smelling of the vintage scotch he'd been drinking. "You look beautiful tonight, Elara," he whispered, but his eyes in the mirror were distant, tracking the movement of his own reflection rather than hers. As he moved his head, she caught it, the faint, cloying scent of jasmine on his collar. It was a perfume she never wore, but one she knew all too well. It was the signature scent of Sienna, her supposed best friend. The touch, once a fire that burned through her, now felt like ice. Elara didn't pull away, she couldn't afford to yet. She was a bird in a gilded cage, and the bars were made of Bennett's billion-dollar prenuptial agreement and the crushing weight of her family's debt. Bennett's hands moved lower, his touch possessive and devoid of the soul that had once defined their marriage. He was the titan of Thorne logistics, a man who treated his wife like a depreciating asset. For months, Elara had endured the subtle gaslighting and the way Sienna would touch Bennett's arm in public with a familiarity that screamed of ownership. Every time Elara tried to speak, she was silenced with a "you're being hysterical." She was being erased in real time. The breaking point arrived at the Thorne Anniversary Gala, an event that was supposed to celebrate their 10 years together. The ballroom was a sea of shimmering satin and predatory smiles. Elara had chosen a gown of deep emerald silk, a dress that made her look like a queen even as she felt like a ghost. But when the time came for the anniversary toast, Bennett didn't call her to the stage. Instead, he stood there with Sienna, whose gown was a blinding, virginal white. "I've realized that growth requires letting go of the past," Bennett announced to the hushed elite crowd. "Thorne Logistics is merging with Sienna's family firm, and as of tonight, Elara and I are ending our journey. She will be retiring to the inheritance her father left her in the Nevada desert. It's for the best." Laughter rippled through the room, the cruel, tinkling laughter of the bored and the wealthy. The inheritance was a joke, a 5,000-acre patch of sun-scorched dirt that her father had bought on a whim, thinking it was a gold mine, only to die penniless when it yielded nothing but dust. Bennett had filed the divorce papers that morning, stripping her of the Thorne name and her dignity in one public, calculated stroke. He threw her out with nothing but a suitcase and the deed to that barren wasteland. Sienna's smirk as Elara was escorted out by security was the last thing she saw, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. The desert was a different kind of hell. The heat in Nevada didn't punish, it hollowed you out. Elara stood in the middle of the scorched earth, the wind whipping her hair into a tangled mess, looking at the dilapidated shack that was now her only shelter. Her bank account was a desert of its own, and the high society friends she thought she had were nowhere to be found. For weeks, she lived on canned beans and bitter resentment, digging into the dirt with a shovel she found in the shed, fueled by a visceral burning need to find something her father had died believing in. Everyone called her the dirt queen of the desert, a fallen socialite who had lost her mind. But the earth has a way of rewarding those who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. It happened on a Tuesday, under a sky so blue it looked like a bruise. Elara was trying to dig a deeper well, her muscles aching and her skin bronzed by the relentless sun. The shovel hit something that didn't sound like stone. It was a metallic ringing sound. She knelt, her fingers clawing through the dry silt until she saw it, a vein of rock that glowed with a dull, silvery sheen under the harsh light. It wasn't gold. It was something far more valuable in the modern world, lithium. And not just a pocket, a massive, high-grade deposit that stretched across the entirety of her 5,000 acres. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was absolute. Within months, the worthless ranch was the center of a geopolitical bidding war. Elara didn't just sell the land, she built the empire. She traded her shovel for a seat at the head of Vance Mineral Group. She hired the best geologists, the most lethal lawyers, and a PR team that began to reshape her narrative from scorned wife to the white gold empress. Dia by dia, she watched from afar as Bennett's Thorne Logistics began to crumble, He had bet everything on the merger with Sienna, but without the steady supply of rare earth minerals for his new electric fleet, his contracts were defaulting. He was bleeding money, and his desperate calls to his suppliers were being rerouted to one place, her office. The poetic justice arrived a year later, at the very same Plaza Hotel where she had been humiliated. This time, Elara didn't come early to wait in a corner. She arrived in an obsidian black Maybach, wearing a dress of liquid silver that looked like the very mineral that had saved her. She entered the ballroom, and the air didn't just change, it froze. She was no longer a sparrow, she was the storm. Bennett was there, looking haggard, his suit slightly loose and his eyes shadowed with the panic of a man on the verge of bankruptcy. Sienna was by his side, her white gown now looking cheap and desperate as she clung to his arm like a parasite on a dying host. "Elara," Bennett stammered, stepping toward her, his voice reaching for a familiarity he no longer had the right to claim. "I've been trying to reach your office. There was a misunderstanding about the supply chain for our Western division. I thought we could discuss a partnership." Elara stopped, her presence so commanding that the people around them backed away, forming a circle of expectant silence. She looked at Bennett, her gaze as cold and unyielding as the stone she had dug from the earth. She looked at Sienna, who was sikarang trembling, her signature jasmine scent replaced by the sour smell of fear. "There is no partnership, Bennett," Elara said, her voice a low, melodic baritone that carried to every corner of the room. "Thorne Logistics doesn't have the capital to partner with me. In fact, as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, Vance Mineral Group has officially acquired your primary debt. I don't want your partnership, I want your keys." The silence that followed was absolute. Bennett's glass shattered on the floor, the sound of his empire breaking in real time. Sienna's jaw dropped, her face pale and ugly in the harsh light of the chandeliers. "You can't do this!" Sienna shrieked, her voice thin and desperate. "We're family, Elara, we were friends." "Family helps family," Elara replied, repeating the words Bennett had used to justify his betrayal. "And I'm helping you, Sienna. I'm helping you find a new place to live because the Thorne estate is now part of the Vance portfolio. You have until midnight to pack your things. I suggest you take the service exit. It's better for the aesthetic." As Elara turned to walk away, she felt a hand on her arm, a tentative, desperate grasp from Bennett. She didn't flinch. She simply looked down at his hand until he pulled it back in shame. "I loved you once, Bennett," she whispered so only he might hear. "But you were right about one thing. Growth requires letting go of the past, and you are very much the past." She walked out of the ballroom, her head held high, the silver of her dress shimmering like a beacon. The city lights of New York spread out before her, no longer a gilded cage, but a kingdom she had won with her own Dua hands. The Dirt Queen was gone, and in her place stood a woman who knew that the most beautiful things in life aren't found in the light of a ballroom, but in the dark, honest depths of the earth. Bennett and Sienna were left in the ruins of their own greed, their names becoming a cautionary tale in the very circles they had tried so hard to dominate. Bennett lost his firm, his home, and his reputation, eventually disappearing into the obscurity he had once feared so much. Sienna, stripped of the wealth she had stolen, found that her friends disappeared as quickly as her credit limit. Elara, however, never looked back. She used her wealth to build a legacy that actually mattered, proving that the best revenge is not just living well, but living so powerfully that your enemies become nothing more than a footnote in your history. If you've ever been pushed into the dirt by people who thought they were better than you, remember this: the earth doesn't care about your pedigree. It cares about your grit. Build your own empire, find your own gold, and live so well that their apologies become background noise in the symphony of your success. Subscribe for more stories of ultimate revenge, hidden wealth, and the power of the woman who refused to stay broken. Your throne is waiting.